So this is lesson 10, placing a circle in standard form. You should have already watched the video on eMath instructions. So this is just a quick little review, and then we'll go over the lesson 10 homework. So just to remember from yesterday, writing equations of circles. A circle that has a center at 0, 0 looks like this, exercise A, x squared plus y squared. Notice there are no numbers next to the x and the y. The number on the right here, this 100, that's the radius squared. So in order to find the radius, we have to take the square root of 100, and that's how I get a radius of 10. Most of our examples, though, will not have a center at 0, 0. So if you look at exercise B, the numbers that are next to the x and y are actually the center, but notice the signs are the opposite. So when I have x minus 5 squared and y minus 2 squared, my center is actually positive 5, positive 2. Again, this is the radius squared, and the square root of 36 is 6. All of the questions that are on the regions dealing with equations of circles, you actually have to complete the square first. So please make sure that you know how to do that. If you're not comfortable doing that after watching the eMath video of lesson 10, then I also posted a YouTube video as a little review of how to complete the square. So right here in exercise 2 on eMath, they were completing the square. Everything that I have underlined is what you do. So I'll do that first one with you. So basically, to complete the square, I take this negative 39 and I move it over to the right, and it becomes positive 39. Then what you do is I have x squared plus 10x on the left. This is considered my b term. I take half of that, half of 10 is 5, and I square it. 5 squared is 25. That's what I add on. So anything that I'm adding on, I underlined, but this is an equation. So whatever I add on to the left, I also have to add on to the right. This now is a trinomial that I can factor. It's a perfect square. So x squared plus 10x plus 25 is actually x plus 5 squared. How do I get this number here? Again, it's just half of this b term. Half of 10 is 5. And then what you can do is you can actually solve. Now, we won't be doing the solving part when we are putting it in standard form just to find the center and the radius, but here on A and B, they actually solved it. So the only difference when we're doing this with circles is we're going to complete the square twice, once for the x's and once for the y's. So if we look at exercise 3 together, this 5 is on the other side. That's great. So I sort of take the x squared minus 4x right here. I take half of 4. Half of negative 4 is negative 2, but I'm squaring it, so that's positive 4. Remember, whatever you add on to the left, you must add on to the right. So you can see that anything I'm adding on, I'm underlining. So this is now a trinomial, and that is a perfect square factor. It's x minus 2 squared. And then I do the same exact thing for the y's. I take half of negative 8 is negative 4. Negative 4 squared is positive 16. Whatever I add on to the left, I add on to the right. This is now a trinomial that I can factor so that it is y minus 4 squared. And now you can see that I'm in my standard form. I can see that the equation of the circle, or the center of the circle, is positive 2, positive 4. This number on the right is the radius squared, so my radius is 5. And I wanted to go through this one with you just to show you how easy it was to graph. If I know my center is 2, 4, on my graph I go to 2, 4 and I draw a point. My radius is 5, so all you have to do is you go 5 to the right, 5 up, 5 to the left, 5 down, and I draw my circle. Okay, so that's pretty much everything. If there's any questions that you have on the rest of that lesson, I'm going to do a live that you can ask questions. So this is the lesson 10 homework. So on each one, I'm placing it in standard form. So I'm completing the square. Anything that I added on, I did in red just so you can see it. So you sort of separate x squared plus 8x. I separate. I left a gap. Y squared minus 2y I wrote. I left a gap. So I have to figure out what to add to this x squared plus 8x so that it's factorable with a perfect square. Half of 8, I take half of this b term. Half of 8 is 4. And 4 squared is 16. So I add on 16 to the left and to the right. I do the same thing with y squared minus 2y. I take half of this b term. Half of negative 2 is negative 1. Negative 1 squared is 1. Whatever I add on to the left, I need to add on to the right. Now on the right, 8 plus 16 plus 1 is 25. And now on the left, I have these two separate trinomials that are now factorable. X squared plus 8x plus 16 factors to x plus 4, x plus 4. But instead of writing x plus 4 and x plus 4, I write x plus 4 squared. And y squared minus 2y plus 1. Again, it's a perfect square trinomial, so it's y minus 1 squared. Once it's in standard form, then this is just like yesterday. I can write my center is -4, +1. Remember, you're changing the signs here. And my radius is 5. And then B is right here. Same thing was going on. Okay, separate them, leave a gap. Figure out what you're adding to the x's and what you're adding to the y's. Whatever you add, though, on the left must be added on the right. Once you have these trinomials, then they can factor. This is x minus 3 squared, and this one factors to y minus 10 squared. Okay, so on C right here, the only difference on C that might be a little bit trickier is that I had to first take this 88 and move it over to the right. I sort of want a clean slate on the left. I just want x squared minus 16x, and I want y squared plus 10y. I don't want any single numbers. So I took that 88 and moved it over to the right, and it became the -88. I'm then just doing the same thing. Half of -16 is -8. -8 squared is +64. This is now a trinomial that factors to x minus 8 squared. Half of 10 for the y's is 5. 5 squared is 25. This is now a trinomial that factors to y plus 5 squared. Remember, whatever I added to the left, I'm adding to the right. I add all these up and I get 1. So my center is 8, -5, and my radius is 1. And same thing was happening on D. I took this y squared and I moved it over first. So I have x squared plus 8x, and then I have my y squared. Now the x squared plus 8x, you do have to complete the square. Half of 8 is 4, 4 squared is 16. The y squared, though, is perfect. You don't need to do anything with that. If there is no number next to it, then the center for the y coordinate is going to be 0. So this center is -4, 0, and my radius is 10. And then E and F are a little bit different in that there is a number in front of the x squared and the y squared. We can't do this with a coefficient in front. So basically, I'm dividing everything by 3. And the only way this is going to work if all the numbers they give you are divisible by the same number, and they always will be. So when I divide by 3, I get x squared plus 14x, y squared plus 4y equals 11. And then the stuff that I'm adding on to complete the square is all in red. So you can take a look at that. F is the same thing, that I have to divide everything by 2 so that I do not have any coefficients in front of the x squared and the y squared. Once I do that, I'm left with what's in blue. The red is what I use to complete the square. Half of -10 is -5, but I'm squaring it, so that's how I am adding 25 to the left and to the right. Half of 12 is 6. 6 squared is 36. I'm adding 36 to the right. This is now a trinomial that I can factor. It's a perfect square. It's x minus 5 squared. And this is a trinomial that I can factor. It's y plus 6 squared. My center is +5, -6, and my radius is 12. Okay, so there'll be a hard copy of these answers as well on the website and on the Google Drive, Google Classroom. And then if we look at the next page right here, they just want me to, it's a multiple choice question. I still have to do all this work, even though they're just asking me for the radius, but I have to complete the square with the x's. I have to complete the square with the y's, because I need to figure out what I'm adding on the 16 and the 9 to get 38. Remember, this number on the right is the radius squared, so my radius is actually the square root of 38, and they just wanted the number that's closest to that, and that is choice 4, 6.2. Okay, 3 wants to know which of the following would be the maximum y value on the circle whose equation is shown below. So again, I have to complete the square right here. I do it for the x's, I do it for the y's. You can see what I did. I need to find my center. My center is negative 5, 2. So I'm sort of doing like a pretend graph. My center is negative 5, 2. My radius is 10. So if you were to go to I drew a little sketch here. I put a point at negative 5, 2. And then remember, when I'm graphing this, my radius is 10, so I go 10 to the right, 10 up, 10 to the left, 10 down. And this question wanted to know, what is the maximum y value? Well, if my center is right here at negative 5, 2, and I have a radius of 10, I'm going to go up 10. My maximum y value is y equals 12. And question 4 is another multiple choice, just to show you how we can change this up, but you're really doing the same thing the whole time. I want to know the length of the diameter of the circle. So again, I complete the square. Remember, I want to start with a clean slate, so I take this 39 and I move it over to the right, and it becomes negative 39. I have to complete the square for the x's, but I don't need to do it for the y's because it's just y squared. I complete the square for the x's. I now have this number on the right is the radius squared. So my radius is 5, but remember they wanted the diameter. Notice though that 5 is one of the choices, so you do have to be careful. And the last one, I just want to solve this system of equations. The first one is a line. A line is super easy. I just need my m and my b, my slope and my y-intercept. So my y-intercept is 2. The line is this blue line right here. On my graph, I go to the y-axis at 2. My slope is 1, so I went up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, and I drew my line right there. For my circle, I have to complete the square, so you can see how I did that. I complete the square for the x's. I complete the square for the y's. Remember, whatever you're adding on the left to complete the square, you must also add on the right, because this is an equation. We have to keep it balanced. And then once I can put it in my standard form, my center is positive 3, negative 1. Because remember, I'm changing the signs. The numbers next to the x and the y are the center, but I do need to change these signs. My radius is 6. So I go to 3, negative 1. And let me just move this compass out of the way right there. If you don't have a compass, you're just going to draw your circle as best you can. It does not need to be perfect. But for my circle, I go to my center is 3, negative 1. My radius is 6, so I went 6 to the right, I drew a point. 6 up, I drew a point. 6 to the left, I drew a point. And then 6 down, I drew a point. I draw my circle, but I really want my points of intersection, or where the circle and the line meet. So my points of intersection are negative 3, negative 1, and 3, 5. Okay, so that is lesson 10. And if you have any questions, I will send out a message when we can meet live and you can ask questions.